Good morning and a huge welcome to all of our delegates across our beautiful country today. I trust that you are all keeping well and are staying safe. My name is Cornelius Botma. I am from the University of South Africa, and I will be serving as program director for the webinar today. So my first opportunity to welcome a speaker is a colleague and a very experienced Professor Jackie Young, from academia, from the Department of Finance, Risk and Banking at UNISA, and also with experience from Standard Bank. So over to you, Jackie.
Well, thank you, Niels. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you this morning, especially on behalf of UNISA and RubyQ, to our second webinar, which we host on an annual basis on operational risk maturity. Our theme this morning is from risky to resilient, and we will concentrate on risk resilience in a COVID world. A special word of welcome to our keynote speakers and panelists, namely Jaques van Wyk, Roselle Swanepoel, and Pierre de Wet. I hope that everyone will benefit from this webinar this morning, one way or another. From a UNISA's perspective, I would like to invite you all, if you've got a topic that needs further research on operational risk, to contact us in this regard. And we would like to use these topics to investigate and make it available to our master's and doctorate students for further research. Thank you for joining us this morning, and welcome again and enjoy. Thank you, Niels.
Thank you very much, Jackie. So you've heard the title. The title is From Risky to Resilient. So with this title in mind, here's the thing. Yesterday, I received an email from a news source that I follow, Cyber Heist News. And the title of the news item was, the number of daily ransomware attacks skyrocketed nearly 1,000% in 2021, growing from 14,000 in June 2020 to 149,000 this year. The report further states that the key takeaway is that ransomware is a clear and present danger, regardless of the industry or size. So, with this frightening statistic in mind, it is my pleasure to welcome our keynote speaker, Mr. Jaques van Wyk from JGL Forensics, an expert in the field, and that's going to provide us with some valuable insights, I'm sure. Thank you. Over to you, Jaques.
Thank you very much for the opportunity and introduction. And thank you very much for being able to present on this topic. And quite correctly, as you stated, that the statistics are frightening, and that is an ever-increasing threat to us. Unfortunately, South Africa is not very well prepared for this pandemic in terms of cybercrime that we're seeing at the moment. We are so focused on the human factor. And in my presentation, that will start shortly, I'll deal with it. But the fact is that cyber attacks is probably going to be the lasting effect from the COVID pandemic. And we are starting to see the effect of it. As I prepared, this Transnet was hit, and then now we have department, the courts being hit as well. So nobody is immune to these criminals, and it's a business, ladies and gentlemen. So on that note, if I can ask Kristen to start the video, and thank you very much for the opportunity to have joined and this such an esteemed panel, and thank you to UNISA for creating a forum where we can share information and educate. Thank you very much. COVID-19 pandemic and the fertile ground it has created for cyber attacks and ransomware. Ironically enough, as I was preparing my notes for this recording, Transnet was hit by a massive cyber attack on the 22nd of July 2021. This was just at the end of the massive riots and looting we saw in KwaZulu-Natal, and to a more limited scale in Gauteng. The impact of this attack meant that Transnet declared a force majeure on contracts and services, which was only terminated on the 2nd of July 2021.
Now, to put this in context, Durban is the largest and biggest harbor in Africa in terms of cargo handling, that being either containers, bulk, and also vehicles, to name but a few of some of the exports. The impact, it was approximately the disruption of 170,000 containers. Some ships actually passed South African ports because of these massive delays. You can imagine, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a ship lying outside a harbor, it delayed the rest of the schedule for that vessel and the containers or the bulk it carries. Now, it is ironic that this basically paralyzed South Africa after the riots. Now, this harbor feeds a large portion of our economy with imports and exports. And the number, depending on different sources, handles as much as 60% of all cargo going through our ports. So therefore, although all ports were hit, it was significant and most reported on Durban. So who was the attackers? Now, as I made this video, it is speculated that it was by the group Revel, which is from Eastern Europe, and that the software they used was DevKitty, which follows the same suit as DevKitty, Hello Kitty, and Five Hands. So the attack was on all of the systems, and it paralyzed everything and all systems within Transnet. Now, Transnet has not made any public statements as to the attack other than very limited information, therefore we only speculate. So it might be that after I've made this video for the webinar that there are updates. So therefore I can only provide what I have as of today while making this video. Now, there was speculation that ransomware included a demand, but that is not being confirmed or denied by Transnet in the media. But that is alleged by people close to the matter that assisted Transnet. So time will tell, and we will then have the full story. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, this is quite an interesting introduction, and I think it's spiced up and gave a lot more relevance to this pandemic and scourge of ransomware and cyber attacks that's becoming an increasing problem in South Africa. But let's go back to the formal presentation, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you take something away for you and your organizations and that you will be better prepared after today's webinar. We have some great speakers today, and I'm quite excited to also listen to some of the other presentations. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's get back to the main presentation. So firstly, let's just look at a definition of cyber risk as defined by the Institute of Risk Management. They define it as cyber risk means any risk of financial loss, disruption, or damage to the reputation of an organization from some sort of failure of its information technology systems. So two takeaways from that is that all types and sizes of organizations are at risk, not only the financial services firm, defense organization, and high-profile names which make the headline. Two, the true extent of the risk has yet to be assessed, let alone managed, and that the threat is very real. What do I include in technology assets, ladies and gentlemen? Those are the networks, the systems, the information, the data, the software, and the programs. In many cases, the more sophisticated and extensive a business digital operations, the higher the cyber risk involved. So, according to Deloitte Advisory Risk Services, cyber risk is an issue that exists and intersects of business risk, regulation, and technology. And this is from the 2019 Future of Cyber Survey. So at cyber attacks, we include, but are not limited to, denial of service, DOS attacks, hacking, ransomware, phishing, spoofing, malware, and spamming. Cyber threats may come from a variety of sources, ladies and gentlemen. Those could be criminal gangs, various independent nations and states, corporate espionage, disgruntled employees, and also individual hackers hoping to strike it rich. What is the impact of these security incidents, ladies and gentlemen? Well, firstly, the real monetary cost, including the financial cost to bring service back online due to operational disruption, legal fees, and even regulatory fines. There's also the intangible side, which include loss of customer trust, loss of goodwill, reputational loss, diminished brand reputation, weakened market position, or in certain cases, even change in leadership. The key point to take away here is that there's been a clear shift from hacking, which focus on data breaches, to ransomware attacks. And the question is simply why? Well, ladies and gentlemen, criminals are also business people. They want to optimize and maximize the return on their time and investment. In 2020, a staggering 31% of global companies reported that they were attacked by cyber criminals at least once a day. Let me repeat that, at least once a day. Over 1,000 companies reported that they had sensitive data stolen or leaked due to these attacks. It is a staggering $1.4 billion that were the cost to the American economy due to these ransomware attacks, ladies and gentlemen, and cyber attacks in 2020. So how are these cyber attacks perpetrated, ladies and gentlemen? A third approximately via email, a third via the web, approximately 20% via software vulnerabilities. In a survey, it was found that over 1 in 5 IT managers said that they could not confirm or establish how their networks were breached and compromised. That is stating, ladies and gentlemen, if you cannot identify the point of weakness, how do you address and fix it? Now, we all are so fixated on the 4th industrial revolution and the benefits and the world of things and being connected. But artificial intelligence and automation has also empowered and emboldened cyber criminals in their attacks, because these bring resources to them and allow them to plan and execute a lot more sophisticated and overwhelming attacks on systems. So, looking at 2021, in the last 8 months or 7.5 months, ladies and gentlemen, what are the current trends that we've seen? Well, ransomware, ladies and gentlemen, has seen a huge spike. Coalition, which is a cyber insurance provider, have indicated that up to 41% of all claims received this year already have been because of ransomware. COVID-19 scams and other cyber threats, ladies and gentlemen, have become a lot more sophisticated. We're seeing that social engineering has gone next level. The appearance, the content, and getting people to share their information via various email interaction, via web interaction, and huge losses being reported by individual and in certain cases, companies. In the third area of growth has been attacks on the remote work tools, ladies and gentlemen, as employees and organizations shift their focus from working from home to minimize COVID exposure. We find that collaboration tools and remote access software have been the focus of these attacks, because they allow these cyber criminals to get access and gain access to organizations, networks, and also the staff members. So by being able to penetrate these remote work tools, it gives them effectively access to the organization and everybody connected and using those work tools. Then the fourth one, ladies and gentlemen, which probably has the biggest impact, has been an increase in supply chain attacks. Now, many organizations, ladies and gentlemen, from small to big, are more and more relying on managed service providers that deals with their IT services, software and solutions. Cyber criminals increasingly see these managed service providers as high-value targets. By compromising a service provider, criminals gain access to potentially hundreds or even thousands of their customers downstream, far more efficient than attacking a single person or a single organization. Poorly configured remote access software is of the most exploited attack vectors. The attackers are also taking advantage of software vulnerabilities and social engineering techniques to gain access to these providers and ultimately their clients. A once quiet epidemic, ransomware, in which hackers, often from Russia or other former Soviet bloc countries, break into computer systems to encrypt and often steal files to hold for ransom, has emerged in 2021 as a major national security issue. In recent months, ransomware criminals have launched several high-profile attacks, including the Colonial Pipeline hack claimed by a Russian group, DarkSide, JBS, one of the world's largest international meat processors, by the Russian group Revil, Universal Health Services, which is a hospital group. The Düsseldorf University Clinic Systems was also disrupted, which led to a death of a patient. This is the first known reported case of where a ransomware or cyber attack has led to a death of a person. So, why is this so worrying? Well, we had the Kaseya ransom attack that has got experts really worried, because we see the emergence of apex cyber criminal predators. One of the most prolific ransomware gangs, Revil, conducted its boldest attack yet on the 4th of July weekend on Kaseya, which services customers who in turn contract with thousands of businesses. Though the dust has yet to settle, the researchers say the hack allowed Revil to infect more than 1,500 different organizations. The gang demanded $70 million to unlock the infected computers. So why are security experts so worried about the Kaseya attack? They deployed a level of planning and sophistication closer to high-level government-backed hackers' tactics, usually reserved for well-resourced nation-state hackers. Revil used two new tactics previously not used by the ransomware criminals, namely, one, they acquired and used zero-day vulnerabilities, a cybersecurity term for vulnerability in a program that software developers aren't aware of and thus haven't had time to fix. Two, they didn't target a single victim, but rather a company with a small but key role in the internet ecosystem. This gave them access to potentially tens of hundreds of thousands of victims. So who is Revil? They have been active since at least early 2019. Like a number of other Russian-speaking ransomware criminals, Revil has made a fortune in recent years by hacking individual organizations, locking their computers, stealing their files, and demanding a payment to fix things, and not to leak sensitive information that they stole. Revil has previously dabbed in deploying its ransomware through so-called supply chain attacks, which exploits how interconnected internet services operate. In 2019, the group successfully hacked TSM Consulting Services, a small Texas managed service provider, which handles web services for organizations that don't want to do it themselves. Soon, 22 of the company's clients, all Texas towns, were infected with Revil's ransomware. The state and federal government jumped on the case, however, and the towns were eventually able to get back online without paying a ransom. Revil took that kind of supply chain and hack to the next level with the Kaseya attack. That gave them access to a sizable set of victims, potentially broader than any known criminal hacking history. This brought us to the new age and new era of cyber attacks. Because companies continue to pay millions of dollars in ransoms, we have cyber criminals who are now more determined and better resourced than ever before and therefore we are creating apex predators. In a statement posted to its website, DarkSide echoed a sentiment common across ransomware criminals, that they an apolitical group only interested in making money. The post read as follows: "We are apolitical. We do not participate in geopolitics. Do not need to tie us with a defined government and look for other motives." The gang posters, and they obviously misspelled the word government on the website. Our goal is to make money and not creating problems for society. From today, we introduce moderation and check each company that our partners want to encrypt to avoid social consequences in the future. It is clear, therefore, ladies and gentlemen, that even the criminals want to choose their targets to prevent or limit any pushback or consequences, and therefore are becoming more and more selective. Doing their homework, ladies and gentlemen, like we do as organizations. Brett Callow, an analyst at the cybersecurity company Emisoft, stated the following: DarkSide doesn't eat in Russia. It checks the language used by the system, and if it's Russian, it quits without encrypting. The pace of attacks is relentless, leading to renewed efforts from President Joe Biden to deliver a message to Vladimir Putin that they're unacceptable. In mid-June, Biden met with Russian leader Vladimir Putin and discussed the issue, stressing how much ransomware emanates from Russia, where the criminals behind it seem to operate with impunity. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's bring it back home. What have been the key impact of COVID on companies and staff working from home? A 400% jump in WebEx traffic since the coronavirus pandemic began, according to Cisco Systems. 85% of businesses now have at least 50% of their workforce operating remotely, according to a CNBC survey. What has been the impact on risk due to COVID from the shift to working from home, ladies and gentlemen? Those who were already online had to expand, introducing entirely new processes into their workflows. This rapid shift opened organizations up to cyber threats on a larger scale than ever before. So what are these risks? Well, unsecured networks at home, no or common passwords on home routers, use of private devices with no or low security, circumvention of approved processes or workarounds, employees or customers accessing the company's systems from unsecured networks, remote access by employees to company networks with administrative privileges, employees using personal devices to access bank accounts to initiate or make payments, neglecting to review the company's cybersecurity policies and updating them to include the new normal of working from home. So how do you and your organization reduce your organizational risk to cyber attacks? 1, professionalize your home network setups, ladies and gentlemen. Assist your staff with both technology and process changes and implement work collaboration solutions. These home networks must become an extension of your IT infrastructure while retaining control over business data. 2, educate your employees, ladies and gentlemen. Cybersecurity awareness training isn't a luxury, it is a necessity. Take the time to educate your employees. 2, recognize cyber threats. This could be done, for instance, with showing them a simulated phishing attack. B, educate them to how cyber criminals operate. C, how to react in case of a cyber attack. D, create a protocol that employees are aware of and are trained to enact when a company device has been stolen, lost, or potentially breached. 3, look at your segmenting your networks, i.e., manage your user privileges to ensure only authorized employees are able to access certain data sets. 4, update software Keep your organization software, both on a network level and user level, up to date, so there are few weaknesses for criminals to exploit. It is important that you apply patches and other software fixes as they become available from your software providers. 5, invest in a good defense system, ladies and gentlemen. Apply a defense in-depth approach to your IT system. What does it mean? Well, it means that you will have multiple layers of security controls. These would include, but not limited to, firewalls, intrusion prevention systems, which is IPS systems, and also intrusion defense systems, which are IDS systems. Also ensure that you have adequate backup policies and systems in place to ensure that you can have a recovery strategy that you can implement in the event that you've been exploited. 6, review and update policies and procedures regularly. Compiling a list of policies and procedures to keep your business safe is a good start, but you have to commit to enforcing those policies if you want to defend against cybercrime and cyber attacks. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. And in closing, we're facing an enemy, ladies and gentlemen, that are evolving, that is technology savvy, understands artificial intelligence, becoming more financially resourced, operates from countries that are not clamping down. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, your risks are growing exponentially. Your financial investment in your defense systems and your people need to follow that. I know that the saying goes that there must be a return on your investment. The flip side of that coin is, can your organization survive a cyber attack, be it from loss of reputation, loss of customers, claims against the organization? We need to educate, but also, ladies and gentlemen, assess, and assess. You cannot do a risk assessment once a year anymore and think that your organization will be safe. Involve professionals and experts on an ongoing basis to review, assess, and recommend so that your organization will remain safe and remain viable, because they can operate in this incredibly hostile environment. This is not the jungle, ladies and gentlemen. This is an environment where you are a juicy piece of steak. Both the lion, the tiger, the hunter, and the guy next door wants a slice of you. Please remain safe, and thank you for the opportunity to share my message.
I'm Rizal Swanepoel from Fujifilm South Africa, and I'm talking to you today around a ransomware attack that happened earlier in the year with Fujifilm and how we've managed to get out of the attack successfully. I joined Fujifilm South Africa in August of 2020 as the Senior Corporate Planning Analyst, and it was mainly to assist them with project management as well as risk management aspects. I have completed my MBA in 2015 at GIBS, and I have over 10 years experience within the banking industry pertaining to risk management. Throughout my career, I have demonstrated continual expertise in performing high-level risk assessments, leading motivated and productive teams, implementation of policies to minimize liability risk, and automation of controls to streamline the processes. So who is Fujifilm South Africa? We are a multinational company that is operating in over 50 countries. We have over 75,000 global employees supporting Fujifilms in various aspects, like logistics, services, sales, and marketing. We opened our doors in 2012 in South Africa, and since 2017, our focus is to increase our footprint in South Africa, in the Southern Africa. We have 4 main divisions in South Africa, namely corporate, graphics division, imaging solutions, and the medical division. Within our medical division, we are looking at new technology, which is the IVD dry blood analysis, which is a very exciting aspect for South Africa to look into. So what is ransomware? Ransomware is a type of malicious software designed to block access to a computer system until a sum of money is paid, and this is according to the Oxford Dictionary. This blue screen of death is something that we are very familiar with, and this is when your computer crashes and you need to just reboot it and you can continue working. But what we don't want to see is the following two screens. This is known as a ransomware notification. This means that your precious files and those of your suppliers and customers have been encrypted and is no longer accessible unless you pay money or bitcoins for the decryption. So why is ransomware important to businesses to focus on? Well, according to this flashcard, in 2020 alone, ransomware attacks went up to over $20 billion US. Now that is a big sum of money that you don't want to lose in any business. Every 11 seconds, a business will be attacked by ransomware in 2021. And they say 17% of the victims that pay this ransom do not get their data back. Another stat that I can share with you is in the last year, 55% of businesses were attacked, 57% in Europe, 69% North America, and 61% in Latin America. Some of the industries that's been attacked in the last year is government, manufacturing, construction. So as you can see, nobody these days are safe. 28% of small, medium businesses state that they do not have the plans to mitigate a ransom attack. So let's see what happened in Japan, Fujifilm. So in our timeline at headquarters Fujifilm Japan, on the 1st of June, we realized in Europe that there has been an attack on our system. On the 2nd of June, we pulled the plug. So we successfully managed to shut down our networks over 4 time zones and 50 countries. Our IT and Crisis Management Committee engaged with external parties to support investigation and develop the solution. On the 3rd of June, our first antivirus was launched and recognized that we've contained the virus. All regions servers were then scanned, and the first European region services were up and running at the end of the day. On the 4th of June, another antivirus solution was deployed from a different vendor, allowing us to scan our laptops and workstations across the globe. No virus was found, and Fujifilm Japan IT department gave the green light to restart the whole infrastructure and resume our daily tasks. No ransom was paid. So what is going to happen with us going forward? We are going to share lessons learned and obviously try to better our controls to make sure we don't have future attacks. What we've learned from the positives from this initiative is we didn't pay the ransom. So this was some of the headlines in the news. It was excellent teamwork from all entities, efficient communication, strong controls to rely on, and quick reaction. So our BCM plan was definitely in place. Negatives is negative publicity. Nobody wants to see a highlight which says Fujifilm confirms ransomware attack disrupted business operations. We had loss of profits as well as loss of productivity due to this attack. So lessons learned that we can share with the public is as follows. Think before you click. An attachment might contain a virus or a link that can lead you to a malicious website. Do not reveal personal or financial information. Useful information can be used for further sophisticated phishing attempts. Check the spelling. Poor spelling looks suspicious and should raise an alarm. Check the sender's name and email address. The name and email address might be spoofed. And lastly, check the sentence structure. It might be Google translated from a different language. Thank you.
Hi, my name is P.R. de Wet. I am a lawyer. I'm a partner and director at the law firm VDT Attorneys. We're based in Pretoria, Brooklyn area. I'm heading up the commercial division for VDT. My speciality is mainly focusing on all things related to company law, tax matters, structures, offshore structures, and advice around that. The past few years, of course, especially coming into play is the technology space as well, in terms of data protection laws. We do a lot of work in our field, the interplay between data privacy and the rights of protection in terms thereof, and how that interacts with technology on a daily basis as well. So that as far as the commercial division is concerned, we have a large focus in terms of that. The rest of the firm has a large focus on property law, all aspects of property law, and in litigation, mainly focusing just on commercial clients and commercial aspects surrounding all things related to property and technology. The firm has been around for roughly 90 years by now. So with a large presence, not just only in Pretoria, but also with a national footprint and serving global clients in that space as well. So my topic for this webinar will be the focus on data privacy legislation. Again, just not from a South African perspective, but on a global perspective and how it interacts with the GDPR, how South African legislation was affected or is affected and is going to be affected in South Africa from a GDPR perspective, interaction with other legislations that is continually to grow and change as the time changes, something like the Cyber Act that has come into effect now very recently, and how that will affect the day-to-day business and operations of companies trying to do business in South Africa, whether you are a local South African company or you're an international company trying to do business in South Africa. Some of the challenges that we're already facing just with the introduction of the Protection of Personal Information Act is clients not really understanding the legislation itself, not really understanding the scope and extent to what they need to comply with and how the Act will affect their businesses going forward. And not just their businesses, of course, the repercussions that will have that if their business does not comply in terms of the legislation, how they will recover from a potential claim in terms of damages should that ever occur. Clients are almost treating the legislation currently in South Africa as something that they will attend to once something happens. So the legislation has come into effect. We haven't really seen the teeth yet of the information regulator, but that doesn't mean that the information regulator is not getting ready for all things in relation there to that they can enforce in terms of their powers. It's quite significant powers that have been offered to somebody like the information regulator, again referring back to the GDPR being a first world country in Europe, where legislation like this makes sense for big companies like the Facebooks and the Instagrams of the world and so on, but comparing that and bring it back to SMEs in South Africa is quite a challenge for them to accept and to adopt the necessary systems and processes in order to become compliant with the legislation. I think more than just law, and especially the so-called fourth industrial revolution that we currently find ourselves in and that we live in, the law is not something that you can just look at it on its own. It's got interaction with technology, as I've mentioned. It's got interaction with all aspects of the economy, and having regard to data, not just being stored or saved somewhere in a drawer anymore, sitting on a hard copy file, and everybody around the globe becoming much more aware about their own personal data. Is something that companies will need to consider from a technology perspective as well as to how the Act will affect their systems and their processes and the way and the manner in which they currently go about the processing of personal information. And it's not a cheap exercise for companies. It's quite a costly exercise to go through. The fees just in relation to having regard to all of the legal documents and the policies and the amount of agreements that a company works with on a daily basis is already a costly exercise just to keep intact and to make sure that you have proper succession control in terms of these documents. And now more so, these documents have to speak directly into a system that regulates and manages data privacy on a daily basis. And that becomes quite a heavy task, a lengthy task, and a process that needs to be planned for. There's a full process that the company needs to go through in terms of preparing for data privacy. It's not an overnight exercise. It's not a tick box exercise. It's a full privacy compliance plan that one has to put in place, and to give effect and execute that privacy plan is something that can take time depending on the size of the organization, the amount of data that they work with. Is it a company that's only based in South Africa, or are they doing operations on a global scale? Again, with technology today, it's so easy for companies to immediately have an effect on a global scale, and that would affect them to take into cognizance not just South African legislation, but global legislations as well.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome at this UNISA webinar. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jaques van Wyk. I'm the Managing Director for JGL Forensic Services. We've been in business for the last 20 years and have seen the days from paper-based to where technology now overwhelms us on a day-to-day basis. We have seen our space change from, as I mentioned, paper-based, doing a lot of research, going through papers. Then we had technology moving into databases, more information and records. We now find ourselves today where we live in a world that is connected. The internet, we have devices, tablets, laptops, desktops. We have artificial intelligence. We have social media that's all have exploded. And with this benefit of technology making our world so connected, we now face a real risk, ladies and gentlemen. It's like in the older days where you had the stagecoach being robbed, and then we went digital and people waited at the ATM to hit you over the head to get your money. Then we started cloning accounts. And now we have synthetic personalities and persons where they can take over your credit records and really clean you out and take you to the cleaners. So these have been developments, ladies and gentlemen. So as we are all living and enjoying technology, the criminals are sitting back and saying, real opportunity here for us to also get a lot more wealthier, a lot quicker. Criminals are business people as well, ladies and gentlemen. So therefore, we can't live in this bubble of bliss of being, we are okay and we are safe. Because what COVID-19 has shown us is that there are huge vulnerabilities out there. And as we have early uptakers of technology by cyber criminals, we have to also be a lot smarter. So in my presentation, I'll be talking about the impact of COVID-19, ladies and gentlemen, the shift from the office to working from home, how that creates opportunities for these cyber criminals. What is the trends we're seeing out there in the cyber criminal world? And funny enough, as I was preparing the script for my presentation, Transnet was hit by a massive cyber attack, ladies and gentlemen. 12 days of disruption at our ports, 170,000 containers being impacted on shipping lines, skipping South African harbors. Now, just to put in perspective, Durban handles about 60% of all container traffic, bulk traffic and vehicle exports in South Africa, which is a huge impact, given also with the riots and unrest in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. So quite ironically, ladies and gentlemen, as we were preparing, this happened. And I integrated in my presentation as well, ladies and gentlemen. So while we move to this new normal of staff working from home, we need to empower them with education, to the technology that we use to make these environments more safe. So moving from centralized computing, centralized security, centralized control, we are now moving to decentralized. And that is a whole new kettle of fish, ladies and gentlemen. It is therefore important that we will leave you some real food for thought, ladies and gentlemen, to make your working environment more safe, to empower your staff, ladies and gentlemen, and be safer in an environment that is so dynamic. And as we bring in new technology, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have to do another series where we update, because this is a never-ending race. It's not about a quick fix. It's about being aware, preparing, dealing with it, and then reassessing. A never-ending race. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us this morning. And we hope that you will take something away for your organization. Thank you.
Thank you to our panel of experts and our speakers, certainly a host of additional thoughts that we need to get our minds around. And for that reason, we have arranged a panel session where we can enable you to engage with our speakers. So the opportunity is there for you, please, to ask questions. You do so on your chat system. I've got my laptop here. I'm seeing there's already a number of questions coming up. Please don't be shy, ask the questions, and we'll try and give you some answers, or certainly, some sort of possibilities. Let us begin. I see there's a question we have here for Jaques, and that is, since the cyber attack on Transnet, was there any other high-profile attacks? Jaques?
Thank you very much. Yeah, the the attack on the Department of Justice and the impact that it's had, not just on court functioning, but also the payouts, where it administers the payouts to children and those funds. And there was first denial from CETA that they somehow dropped the ball, but slowly but sure they're getting back online. It's very clear that somehow our state entities and government is being targeted very aggressively. Now, that could be pure coincidence, or it could be from a monetary point of view that we're seeing. But that all organizations are vulnerable. And I think, it was pointed out by one of the other speakers, companies do not want to admit or acknowledge in public that they've been hit. And therefore, a lot of attacks go unreported and unknown, even though, if you've been hit, information has been compromised, you have to report it now by law. No harm, no foul. And unfortunately, so I think it's underreported. So we're sitting on top of a pandemic, but I don't really think we understand how big the underlying current is in the end of the day.
Let me have a look. I have another question here. What is your take on the introduction into law of the Cyber Crimes Act? I think that one is for you, PR.
Yeah, thanks, Niels. So I think it's a very important piece of legislation that has come into effect, especially having regard to what all our speakers have said here today, and the necessity of our legislation to modernize criminal sanction for modernized criminal actions that are taking place now on a regular basis. We've heard the statistics. I mean, I've read an article on Bloomberg. It boils down to almost an attack almost every 11 seconds, a ransomware attack. So it's quite significant. The legislation, of course, and as I've mentioned in my introduction as well, is quite difficult for a lot of organizations to understand. In a third world country such as South Africa, to implement all of this so-called red tape legislation of doing business in South Africa, it's quite hard to stomach as well. But it is very important. I mean, if you just look at the interaction with the Protection of Personal Information Act that has come into effect now, and also how organizations basically try to implement this legislation, understand this legislation, and they've got a sort of a grudge payment against it. And the thing is, the Cyber Security Act is there to protect organizations once you have implemented policies and procedures to the extent that you are supposed to do it in terms of POPI. POPI is there as a guideline to help you how to lawfully process personal information, and the Cyber Crimes Act is there to sanction the perpetrators who are unlawfully accessing that personal information. So it's a very important piece of legislation. As I've said, and as most of the speakers said, we live in a world where we're involved in the fourth industrial revolution, and technology is becoming so significant in order just to keep on doing business in South Africa. And these legislations are built around your own protection and to make sure that you put in place the required processes and procedures, and that will just help an organization in treating cybercrimes attacks, treating ransomware attacks, and know how to come out of a situation like Fujifilm have done so far. So it's a very important piece of legislation, and I think it's a very good step in the right direction for South Africa. Being a third world country, adopting legislation to such extent will definitely protect our organizations and everybody that's just doing business on a global scale. A lot of people think that I'm a small business, it's not going to happen to me, why would anybody try and attack me? And the thing is, you sit with this small mindset that you're in South Africa, or perhaps just in Pretoria, or even just a suburb of Pretoria. You're not thinking globally. The attacks come from Russian entities, from East European countries, and so on. And if you are using emails, if you are using websites, then you are open to attacks like that. So you can't just think small, and you have to think on a global scale, and that's why legislations like the Cyber Crimes Act, like POPI, is there to help organizations. So I think it's a very, very good step in the right direction and an important piece of legislation for South Africa to have adopted.
Thank you. Thanks, PR. You did mention Fujifilm, so I see there is a question here for Rizal. How did you first become aware, and how did you deal with the situation of the ransomware attack on Fujifilm?
Thanks for the question. So we firstly became aware because our IT department obviously scan our networks quite frequently, and we have the right control measures in place. Because we are a multinational, we can't just rely on controls in country. So they do scan the systems regularly. They then picked up that there was this ransomware attack and immediately took action. So yeah, that for us was definitely a main event for us to make sure that we are then closed off and make sure that we are then ready to get back up and rolling again.
Okay, interesting. I see, so Fujifilm did not pay the ransom, and I see there's a question here. Should the South African government follow the lead of other governments, including the US, in prohibiting the payment of ransoms? The panel, any views?
I think that might be a good one for Jaques.
Jaques?
I think, you know, like I said in the presentation, is that by paying ransom, we're actually creating super apex predators. And, you know, even if you bring in a law, if my organization is paralyzed because I can't operate, people will resort to paying. So on paper, don't pay ransom. But I think in reality, a lot of organizations want pay in order to continue the operations. As mentioned in one of the other presentations, there's different statistics, but it varies from between 17 and 50% of people are actually then, after paying the ransom, are being provided with the necessary key codes to restore their information. So even if you pay the ransomware, it's not a guarantee that you're going to be able to restore your information. And therefore, prevention is better than cure. It's like a pregnancy, I think. So, yeah, be aware of the risks and prepare accordingly for it.
All right, thank you very much, Jaques. Here's another interesting question. I think cyber crime and ransomware appears to be mostly based on technical issues. In fact, I think, Jaques, you also presented a number of technical actions that we can take to prevent some of these attacks, not necessarily only ransomware, but others as well. And they appear to be based on technical issues. Are there any non-technical preventative measures that can be taken to prevent an attack?
I'll take a shot at it,
Okay.
Niels. So definitely, and that's why I've mentioned the Cyber Crimes Act, the POPI Act, and also organizations such as ours, and with the partnerships that we have built, we very soon realized that all of these attacks do happen on a technical basis. And as we said, data is no longer stored in a drawer somewhere or just on a hard copy file that you can safely keep somewhere. It's all in the cloud, it's internet services, and so on. So what organizations need to think is that this is legislation that's come into effect. How do I comply with this legislation? The legislation requires you to put certain policies and procedures in place. Policies, of course, being legal documentation, citation. So if you put a process in place in your organization that you are legally compliant, then it becomes easier for you to also to put systems into place that the legal documents can speak to the technology that you put into place into your systems and processes, because it's a thing of the organization having to adopt a culture and a creation of awareness. And if the organization itself is not aware of their requirements, their legal obligations, what they have to comply with, then it's difficult for them to implement the specific processes and to put the necessary protections in place. Rizal mentioned in a presentation that just by opening a link on an email, be careful, but not everybody organization is educating you or training you to do that. And that's the technical part of it. But once you have put in certain policies and procedures in place as an organization, then you have recourse to take against an employee, for instance, if that should have happened, because you have put the legalities in place along with the systems and processes, and then you could be protected. Same in a ransomware attack, for instance, or if in a hacking case and where there's actually damage caused to your organization. From an insurance perspective, it will go a long way if you can prove to insurers, but these are all the steps that I've put into place. Here's my legal requirements, here's my policies, here's everything that I've put in place. Again, from a legal document perspective, working with service providers who provide this technology to you in order to process personal information. There's a very important aspect that you need to take into consideration in your contract with that service providers to understand where does the responsibility lie, where does the liability lie. So you need to assess from a legal perspective as well, not just from a systems perspective, what are all of the important factors that you need to take into consideration in implementing a full privacy plan like this.
I would like to add to that, if that's possible. From a practical perspective, not all companies has got the means or the systems to monitor the data electronically. So you do have some instances where there's still paper trails and hard copies on the desks and so on of the employees. So it's a matter of, like Pierre said, educating the employees. When you leave your desk, is it a clean desk? Do you have information out there that can be hacked or can be used to hack the company? If you are working remotely, are you locking your laptop when you are sitting in a coffee shop and going to the restroom, just to make sure that your data for your company is not being hacked that way? So there's very practical examples that you can implement. You don't necessarily have to do everything electronically, but just to have paper lying around with signatures on there, ID numbers, your COVID checklist when you check into a building, that is enough information to hack you. And that is the scary part of this.
Thank you, Rizal. Yes, certainly it sounds like and I think Jaques mentioned it as well. He spoke about educate, educate, educate. And I think the human element in this whole process is obviously a key, I wouldn't say a weakness, but a concern, because you need to educate your workers and your staff and to try and get them to understand the risks that they are taking. Not deliberately, it's just, sometimes it's just a question of practice, and being lax in terms of what you do as a worker. And of course, as managers, that's a concern that you have. I have another question here. The question is, are there any specific industries or sectors that are targeted more than others in your experience?
I think it's a good one again for Jaques to answer, but just quickly on that is that the legislation, especially the Protection of Personal Information Act, we already see is bringing out certain sector codes, so very similar to what we get in B legislation, that they have a generic code of conduct that you have to comply with if you want to play in the BE field. And then there is very specific sector codes like the ITC, like the property sector code, and so on. And the Protection of Personal Information Act is already heading that way. There's already guidance and guidelines and sector codes being published for comments, for public comments in terms of the insurance industry and the finance industry and so on. So I definitely think that there are specific areas where these attacks were more likely to be to occur, and that's why I think in terms of the guidelines and the codes that are coming out from the information regulator side is a good indication of those sectors that I think are more highly susceptible to ransomware attacks and to cyber attacks of this nature. Yeah.
But not yet publicly available, or is it already there?
In terms of the Protection of Personal Information Act, the guidelines that are issued for the code of conduct specifically in the finance sector, that's already out. It's publicly available, so that can be viewed from their website. So I think we are still waiting for all of the public comments in that process to be finalized before moving to the next part of establishing more codes of conduct for different sectors.
Thank you very much, PR. Perhaps we can bring in Jaques as well, because this idea of the industries or sectors that are more likely to be targeted than others. Perhaps, Jaques, do you have a view, some experience or some statistics?
Certainly. Just to follow, to continue on what just has been said. So typically, these your cyber criminals are business people, so they're going to go for companies that is information rich. Your banks, your insurance companies, for instance, where they, like we had in the case of Experian, where there's a lot of information that if the company cannot pay a ransom or is not willing to pay a ransom, that you can then on-sell that information on the dark web. We had many years back also where, if I remember, the deeds office were also hacked, and there was a lot of information that was made available. So your professionals will obviously go for your, let's say, more juicier targets that will have more defenses in place. But you'll also have your, let's call them amateur cyber criminals that will buy a hacking tool off the shelf and then sit and target your small business and ask for a half a Bitcoin or a quarter of a Bitcoin or a Bitcoin. So one should not say because I sell ice cream or I'm a big international bank that that I am safe or less risky. The fact is, if you are connected, if you have clients, if you store information, if it's on your desk, like was pointed out, then you are a potential target. I think that IT security in the past were a lot more static. and it was thought as a byproduct. Now with legislation and with the exponential growth in cyber attacks and COVID, which was an accelerator, this will become part and parcel of your business plan as you comply, because you cannot comply to legislation not with having the relevant systems in place, the policies in place. And I say again, educate, 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 because as we sit here, most people will know how a spoofed email address look, or how to look at a link, a suspicious link. But how many of our employees know that? We assume. So I took the long way around to answering this, but in the short is everybody is a potential target. And we even find teenagers being targeted and where their chats or photos in private sessions has been hacked and they are then extorted for money. So unfortunately, nobody is safe. If you're on the net, if you are connected, then you are a potential target. So unfortunately, there's not an easy answer. Is protection, protection, and educate.
Thank you very much, Jacques. Another question that I have is, what are the biggest POPI issues companies should think about regarding remote working? Perhaps PR, that's your expertise.
Yeah, thanks, Niels. I'll take that one. So I think we've mentioned it before. A large issue, and Jacques also mentioned in his keynote, that the employees are now working from home. So how do I make sure that I put in the necessary protections and systems to fend off that risk, where I've got close control in my own office and at my building, where I've got my IT service providers right there on site. I know I've got the necessary protections put in place, but now I need to think about a policy like a take-home laptop policy that I have to put in place, which wasn't there before. And how do I put the necessary safeguards and the internet access to that employee from home back into our offices if they have to connect remotely to a server and so on. So definitely your systems have expanded beyond the building where you have been operating till now. And that's quite important thing to take into cognizance, especially with the modern era that we live in now with the COVID pandemic and everybody working from home. So that's definitely a challenge.
Thank you very much, PR. So I think we have come to the end, just looking at the questions, the end of our session this morning. Certainly a round of virtual applause to our speakers and presenters. Thank you very much for your expertise and your insights and the education that you've brought across to our delegates and our participants. Thanks for your time and insights. It's now come to the end of the session, so it is my opportunity to welcome the final speaker, actually a colleague again, Professor Johan Marx, that will now bring the session to a close. Professor, thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you very much, Niels. I think in closing, I think it's very clear that the velocity, the veracity, the impact of risk events are on the rise. And risk managers, especially operational risk managers, will have to manage people, processes, systems, and external events a lot more careful in future. That's the major implication for our risk managers. We will have to make sure our firewalls are up and that the software is working to protect us against these cyber attacks and ransomware attacks. There's also implications for us in academia. We'll have to up our game with the teaching and learning of our students, and we'll have to do much, much more research. And in that regard, as Professor Young said earlier this morning, please let us know if you have research proposals that we could give to our masters and doctoral students. If you want to send me an email, you're welcome to marxj@unisa.ac.za.
I would like to also take this opportunity to thank Jaques van Wyk, JGL Forensics, for very valuable guidelines and advice in managing these risks. Then also to our two panelists, Roselle Swanepoel of Fujifilm and PR de Wet, VDT attorneys in Pretoria. Thank you for your accurate answers and the responses to the many questions we got this morning. I'd like to take a moment to give a special thanks to two people who've taken the leadership in organizing these risk events every year. Nikki Downing of Ruby Q, and Professor Jackie Young from the University of South Africa. Thank you for the initiative, and we look forward to next year's event when we'll once again discuss some of the major developments in the field of risk management. Also, a word of thanks to their colleagues at both RubyQ and UNISA for supporting us in organizing today's event. And then Dr. Cornelius Botma, thank you for being our program director this morning. You handled it very well.
Thank you very much.
And then, most importantly, you, our attendees, thank you for making the time available to attend today's session. And I'm sure you also learned some valuable lessons from this session. As you heard, we are planning another event for next year, and who knows, it might actually be in person. You never know. It all depends now on the race between the pandemic and how well the vaccination program will go. So let's see. But until next year, take care, stay safe, make sure your ransom protection software is in place and that your firewalls are up. And if you haven't been vaccinated yet, please vaccinate. But from all of us, thank you and goodbye.